After listening to this podcast, we are going to place a survey in the description below. So if you don't mind, please taking a couple of minutes after listening to this podcast and taking that survey, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this podcast. Hi, my name is Sydney Funk, and I am currently a senior at Westminster College, and I'm hoping to get my bachelor's degree in psychology here coming up in May. I have here with me my friend Seattle.
Hello, I'm Seattle. I am also a Westminster senior, finishing.
And why we act the way we act. And I feel like it's just such an interesting topic to talk about because then we're learning more about us and other people, and we can experience all those fun things that come along with being a human being.
Oh, and human beings are so fascinating, aren't we? My goodness.
So fascinating and complex. So
Yes.
today we're going to be really talking about stress and mental health and how to help with dealing with the stress and your mental health, especially within the workplace, because the workplace, especially now with COVID going on, it can be a very stressful environment to be in. And so we just want to talk about ways that we can help take care of ourselves and our own mental health, and some different ways that we can just take care of ourselves in this really stressful time.
Absolutely. And there's actually a national health crisis that was put out by the National Institute of Public Health. And it's on burnout. Burnout has become a crisis within our culture, as it affects basically every big institution within Western culture, like our health field, our food industry, our business relations, and burnout, you so gracefully defined earlier, is
So we're referring to the excessive use of, just your energy and your mental capacity. And so burnout is when you're just constantly working and you're working, and you're just doing more than you should, that more than your body can take. And so even though you're waking up every day and you're like, oh, I slept like 10 hours, I don't know why I'm so tired, you're still tired every day because you're just working, and you're really just overworking your body and your mind, having this experience of burnout, which Seattle previously started talking about, as well as, we're going to give you some more examples of burnout as well a little bit later in the future to try and help make this a little bit clearer.
Yeah, so burnout, Gallup recently surveyed more than 7,500 full-time employees in the Western United States. And about 23% of those workers said that they felt burned out more often than not. That's like
That's
1/4.
crazy.
That's 1 out of 4
That's a
people.
lot of people. I can't believe it. That is, and you know what's sad is that we're probably part of that one for.
Yeah. And additionally, 44% reported feeling burned out sometimes. So that's like more than half. Well,
That's crazy.
yeah. So that's more than half have experienced it sometimes or all the time. And to put that into context, nearly 2/3 of full-time workers are dealing with burnout at some point while at work.
That's crazy. That's a lot of people, a lot of workers for sure dealing with this situation with burnout. And unfortunately, I just feel like burnout is such an idolized thing within our Western culture that it's like, it's romanticized. And we sit here and we're like, oh yeah, I'm so tired. But I worked like 60 hours this week. And it's like, oh, you shouldn't be proud of that. Like, you need to take a break. You need to relax. It's not good for your body or your mental health to be continuously working like that.
And the problem with that too is stigma around reaching out for support for that mental health. Like in Western society, I don't know if you've experienced this, Sydney, but like we kind of have this like ego contest with work. Like, oh yeah, I'm so busy this week. I worked 40 hours and I completed this many assignments. And then your friend's like, yeah, I'm busy too. This week I worked 60 hours and I completed this many assignments. Well, in actuality, like human beings, like we're not really designed to be working 9 to 5 jobs, like and constantly putting out mental, physical, emotional effort. That takes a
Mhm.
that takes a profound impact on our mental health as well as our physical
Mhm.
and emotional health.
Yeah, for sure. I I can completely agree. I mean, I know that there's some times where I've experienced burnout, and when you're working a full-time job and going to school full time as well as working on assignments, you need to be mindful of what you need to do for yourself and your body in order to rejoice from all of that hard work that you've just put yourself through. And um, so I mean, I've personally experienced burnout multiple times, and sometimes it's pretty continuous. It can happen multiple days in a row. I mean, for me, sometimes it's worse than other times. It comes on and off. But I mean, I don't know about you, Seattle. Have you had any experiences like that?
Oh, absolutely. So at the end of this year, like, it was like the 28th of December through like the 3rd of January, I actually booked out
Mhm.
a sensory deprivation retreat because we were just about to start the new semester. I had just gone through some really big significant life changes, and like I had to like check in with my body, and I like felt like I was going to get sick or something was going to happen if I didn't take a break, if I didn't take a pause. And so I paid, it was something like $1,300 to just lay down in a room with like they were like weighted blindfolds and a weighted blanket,
Oh,
and
wow.
I
Mhm.
had sound bath in between, and we ordered a bunch of food for me, and it was sensory deprivation, so I wasn't allowed to speak or see, and I had to like walk around the house like if I was to use the bathroom, um, and that went on for 4 days, and by the end of it I felt like a completely different human being. I came in there, I had hives and a rash, and my throat was sore. Like I was just at my wits end, exhausted. Like enough, so exhausted that I was willing to pay thousands of dollars in order to get and to maintain that rest. I left feeling completely refreshed and rejuvenated.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's great. I'm glad that that definitely worked out for you. I mean, that right there just proves how important that it is that we take care of our body and just do whatever we need to do to make sure that we don't feel that way all the time. Make sure that we can just walk around fully with energy and just experience life the way that we should be experiencing it.
So we're going to be talking a little bit about mindfulness techniques throughout this podcast. And mindfulness has actually been shown to be a very successful method in working with burnout. And so that was just one of the many mindfulness techniques that are available for the public to dive into, and they are experiencing this. And we know that 2/3 of American workers are experiencing this. So we're going to break down talk about the impacts of burnout, and the impacts of what keep people in this culture of overworking. And we're going to give safe coping skills, and ways to deal with that fatigue, um, and hopefully encourage people to get the assistance that they deserve.
We definitely want to be able to provide some kind of resources, whether they're free, maybe low cost. If you have the money and you can spend it on something like what Seattle just described, that's wonderful. Um, so, in regards to burnout, especially with COVID or even outside of from when we weren't experiencing COVID, there's plenty of different areas and fields of work that many people are experiencing this burnout. And one that I can think of would be the grocery store. I had a couple friends working at grocery stores like during the beginning of the pandemic, and they were working crazy hours just to try and keep up the demand of all the supplies that we needed, like toilet paper and canned food. And a lot of them were very scared of what was going to happen next, and so they wanted to stock up. And so I know a lot of people were stuck working for many hours just to try and keep up with this very high demand of food. And so it's just crazy. I mean, that's one field that I can think of. Can you think of any other, Seattle?
Yeah, so the big one that comes to mind is healthcare, and specifically nursing. So, News from the Nation's Health, they posted an article claiming that we have a national health risk on how overworked our nurses are in hospitals. And like you were just saying, the pandemic, um, these nurses are experiencing even more burnout because of that. This came out before the pandemic even started. Um, which is very concerning because it talks about how the quality of care goes away when nurses experience burnout. Um, and this article claims for stigma reduction around mental health for working healthcare professionals um, because of these high risk, high demand, high mentally fatiguing, high emotionally fatiguing, high physically fatiguing jobs. And on the quality of the care that the nurses give is going to reflect the quality of care that they give themselves, ultimately. And these people deserve to feel comfortable enough in order to seek assistance. But often our culture promotes working these long hours. And as you say that it's okay for you to experience burnout, you're giving other people permission to do the same. Like when you're like, oh, I worked 80 hours this week. That's what that's going to do is that's going to create this illusion that that's normal and that's like what is expected, which is unattainable and unsustainable for doing that for an extended period of time without stress reduction techniques.
For sure, yeah. If you don't have a way of coping with that exceeded stress and long working hours, then it's kind of hard to keep up on your health for sure. And talking about the healthcare industry, I actually recently listened to a podcast. It was an NPR podcast, and it's called Too Little, Too Much: How Poverty and Wealth Affects Our Minds. And so this podcast began starting at poverty and a lot of the stresses that they face because of the lack of money that they have, especially if they have kids and a family. It's hard for them to properly provide for them. And so a little bit later in the podcast, they interviewed someone named Kate, and she was a recent grad from medical school who became a doctor. And so she talked about her experience being freshly in that environment and being a doctor in the hospital. And she talked about how she was focused so much on, getting work done. And, she said that she'd always been like this. And so she was just a working gal. She wanted to work good, always have something to do with her time. And so she spent so many hours at the hospital that when she finally got home, she felt like she didn't have enough free time to actually do something. So she wanted to spend those other hours outside of work, like reading or drawing or just going on a run, something that had her body and mind doing something instead of relaxing and getting caught up on sleep and all that stuff. And so eventually that burnout took effect on her, and she met with someone who came into the ER. So he is diabetic, and so they needed to get him into a hospital room to start caring for an illness that he was experiencing. And she almost forgot to prescribe him with some insulin to help him with what was going to. And so she had that realization that her burnout was actually in turn affecting other people. And I think that's just, it's a eye-opening experience to see that not only does burnout affect you, but it also affects other people who are involved.
A good story that I would like to tie into that, and thank you for sharing that. That puts it into so much perspective. It's an analogy of how, like when you ride in an airplane, and have you ever read the safety precautions for the masks? Like if the plane starts going down and you need to put the mask on your face. Well, it actually says to make sure that you put your mask on first before you assist anyone else. And that goes for your children. Like if you're a mother, put your mask on first and then assist your children, because you're more likely to survive if you take care of you and you make sure your cup is filled first before you start assisting others, because then you start giving from an empty cup, right? Or you lose oxygen and you can't put the mask on the rest of your children. You've already just put it on too, and now you're starting to lose oxygen, and 3 people could have lost their lives when you could have just served yourself first. So that's pretty important when it comes to burnout, like to be able to be mindful enough to be able to check in with yourself, like, hey, like, how am I feeling? Am I mentally fatigued? Do I need to take a rest today? And there's no shame in that. And if you work in an environment that does put shame on that, and it's very competitive, well, you're going to be ahead of your competition by focusing your energy and inwards and providing a plan for stress reduction, because stress, there's multiple symptoms of stress. Remind me what some of those are. I think you were talking about those earlier.
Yeah, for sure. So, when a person experiences stress, that be chronic stress, which basically just means that it's happening over a long period of time. If they are experiencing some chronic stress, then dealing with this, it really upsets your body and the homeostasis within it. And so you can experience frequent headaches, you can get dizzy spells, you can even experience some frequent illness. So that's why a lot of people get sick when they're stressed, is because their body is so focused on dealing with the stress that that doesn't also have the resources to care for the illnesses that may come with. It can also cause upset stomachs, panic attacks, difficulty breathing. And so, if somebody is experiencing stress for this long period of time, then it can really break down their body. And this just biologically can show that it really does affect with your overall health rather than just your mental health. And a lot of people don't think that stress has that kind of effect on the body. It's good to have a little bit of stress. I mean, we're taught that growing up, and even in some of my classes, it's okay to have a little bit of stress, but once it gets too much, then it starts actually affecting overall health, and that is definitely not healthy.
Good. And that actually leads me into something that I was reading. There was this article, and it was called The Burnout Effect. And this article talks about how stressful work environments and burnout support workplace bullying. So, what that means is when you're experiencing these high levels of stress and you're in a competitive environment, what that does is it actually promotes bullying within the workplace. And this ties in to the importance of mental health stigma in the workplace, because employees' well-being affects the quality of teamwork and amicable environments in the workplace. So when people are exhausted, they don't feel secure in their positions. Maybe they feel like they don't have as much control. And because they have that sense of a lack of control, often they will project and try to control others, or try to get ahead of the game in these competitive environments by putting other people down. And this affects the whole entire team and the whole entire system and organization. So it's really important for employees to actively look at ways to reduce their own stress, but also for employers to bring in programs that assist in mitigating this stress. This paper promotes that mental health support in jobs that are highly stressful promote better outcomes for clients, for their employees, and for the overall benefit of the business itself. And it was really interesting. So I have a private practice, and a couple of days ago, interestingly enough, I had a client reach out to me, and she had moved to Ohio. She was one of my first clients I had. I did like 6 sessions with her. And mind you, I'm not a therapist. I have a private practice for hypnosis, where I assist people in stress reduction and teaching them mindfulness techniques in order to symptom manage. And she reaches out and she says, I have had this thing going on. I'm a nurse, and things are really stressful because of COVID. I'm working these long hours, and I'm working with these other women, and I just constantly feel put down by these other women. And I think I need a session to assist me with my self-esteem and self-confidence. And I said, oh my goodness, yeah, like I can assist you with that, first off, because what I do works on the subconscious. And so self-sufficiency, self-esteem is a subconscious thing. And so it assists. But I also talked about this article with her. I was like, hey, like you're working in a very highly stressful environment. It's not you that is the problem and why you're receiving this bullying. It's that these people are overworked, they're feeling burnout, they feel a lack of control, and they're projecting that in their outside environment. So I just thought it was interesting that I had read this article and then I had a real life situation occur to me where I saw the effects of this. So that shows me that this is very vast. And that article before said that over 50%, I mean, 2/3 of American workers have experienced burnout at some point. How much of it we could create a more amicable world, a world with more teamwork, a world with more self-sufficiency if we just destigmatized reaching out for mental health support.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that. And a lot of the times, stress can also increase that irritability. And so if you're already stressed and burned out and just overwhelmed, that extra little bit just makes you irritable and you're like, oh, and then I feel like that could definitely have a factor into the way that people treat other people. Is just because they're tired, they're like, oh, this is, ridiculous. And then they take out their frustrations on other people, which is very unfortunate. And I just feel like it's sad to hear that people feel that way, that there is bullying within the workplace because they want to take that control, or they want to try and make themselves look better or put other people down simply because of this experience that they're having within their workplace. Um, I mean, it's not just things at work, but another big thing that I kind of read about that I feel like ties into the bullying is um, I read an article which, we will put all of these resources and references down in the description so that you guys are more than welcome to listen to the podcast, read over any of these articles that we are discussing, and get a little bit better of an understanding if you desire. But I was looking into how, financially, how difficult it can be to receive treatment and receive therapy. And a lot of people who have been identified as having a mental illness, they are automatically going to start thinking that people are going to have negative attitudes towards them simply because they have a mental illness, or they're having issues, and they want to seek therapy to help them with, maybe it might not be mental illness like your situation. It might just be helping with the self-confidence because they've been put down so much in the workplace, um, that a lot of people are scared to even say that they're in therapy because of how other people may view them.
Absolutely. And that goes with employers as well. Like in those highly competitive environments, managers go, "Oh, I dealt with that stress. Why can't you just deal with it?" But
Mm-hmm.
everybody has different ways that they deal with stress, and ways that I mean, similar how they experience it, perhaps, but like also people are going to experience it to different degrees, and people are going to have different
Mm-hmm.
circumstances arise. So setting a standard like, hey, this shouldn't affect you is really limiting because it's going to affect some people more than others.
For sure, yeah. And that's another big reason as to why we're trying to do podcast, is just to bring awareness to the situations that are happening within work, as well as letting you know that it's okay if you get help. It's okay if you need that extra assistance because you're not feeling 100%. You're not feeling the best that you could be. And so, it would be wonderful if employers can provide some kind of mental service to their employees, especially the ones that are working in those high stress situations, like in healthcare, like nurses and doctors. They are constantly dealing with some very high stress situations and things that can be very, hard to deal with on a daily basis. And so providing that mental care, and having that access within the work environment would be so helpful for people to just go in and talk about this to help reduce that stress, reduce that burnout. That could also in turn affect how people are going to be treating one another because they're not feeling so stressed. And so, unfortunately, the stigma within mental health is highly around that. People are embarrassed that they say that they go see a therapist. They're embarrassed if they have a mental illness. Unfortunately, a lot of people express these kinds of concerns, especially because they fear the way that others are going to be viewing them. And so, um, not only is that, but it's also hard to access mental health. Not a lot of people have a doctor's office right down the street. A lot of them may have to drive 20, 30 miles to the to the nearest doctor's office. Some people may not afford the healthcare that's being provided. And if they do, maybe they don't get treated very well. I mean, a lot of times when there's a lack of healthcare in a specific area, sometimes that care isn't to what it should be. Sometimes they're treated poorly, and sometimes, they can't afford it, or their insurance won't help cover the costs of that. And so financially, it can be very restricting to receive that health care.
And that's so interesting, Sydney. This another article that we were reading talks about the impact of socioeconomic status related to risk of depressive illness. And they say that people with a lower SEO, so social economic status, they form an increased exposure to stress, because not only are they stressed from the work environment and what's happening in the work environment, they're stressed about their finances and other like
Yeah.
life
Mm-hmm.
issues. And so they're working in order to negate the stress from their life, and it really just hits them harder. And also these people with lower SEOs, like they're less likely to have insurance, they're less likely to have the resources to deal with these stressors, and perhaps they like chronic strains, losses, traumatic events, environmental impacts affect their ability to achieve goals. And so perhaps they are in lower ranking in the workplace, and they're feeling the stress and the heat from bullying, on top of the financial, on top of the work stress, and it just continues to push them down, and hold them down and kept them from reaching their true potential. And I feel that employers who want to create better environments for their employees will include programs to assist in negating that stress, especially when it is highly stressful. And they should do that in a way that is affordable for everyone who's working throughout the company, especially because looking at people with lower SEO, like potentially they have cultural differences that are barriers that are preventing them from reaching and connecting with somebody who can assist them. And a lot of these people feel stuck, like they've been working 80 hours a week for 3 years, and they find it normal, but their physical health is taking a toll because of that. And then their bills, their medical bills that they are acquiring because they're overworking, are keeping them stuck financially. So it's a negative cycle, a negative feedback loop.
It is honestly just a vicious cycle. There's sometimes it seems like there's no way of getting out of it. It's just one thing, you know, your mental health can be affected by your financial status, but then maybe your financial status is affected by your mental health because, your mental health, you stop going to work because you're so tired, or, you have to keep finding new jobs, you're not making enough money, and it's just a vicious cycle. My goodness. So, in regards to talking about all of this, it's hard for me, honestly. Like, it's hard researching all this and finding out all this information that can come in turn with all this high stress and being in the work environment and everything just tying in with one another. It's now to the point of, how can we deal with this? How can we deal with this stress within the work environment? And, you know, um, I found some easy coping skills that we could follow along with. We could just take care of our bodies, take care of ourselves, eat healthy, eat in general. Maybe you're so stressed that you're skipping a couple meals a day just because you don't have time to eat, or you're not feeling like you want to eat. Just eat something, take care of yourself in that way. Exercise, as much as it can be so hard to exercise, you don't have the energy, just take a little walk around the block, or just sit outside and enjoy the sunshine when it is sunny. Unfortunately, it's really up and down around this time of year with springtime. So when it is sunny, embrace that. Just enjoy the sun and the nice weather. Talk with people, share your thoughts. If that's with another person or a therapist, just talk with someone. It's really important to just discuss what's going on with within your life, so that you can understand it, not only understand it yourself, but find a way to handle that, and find a way to reduce what you're feeling. And so it's really important to be in action with yourself and your feelings.
Absolutely. And tying in with all that self-care, like if you deserve to take that break for yourself. Don't feel pressured
Hmm.
by other people and their standards of how much they work to overwork yourself, because at the end of the day, like you're working in order to provide for yourself. And if you aren't feeling provided for, if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling stressed, there are steps and tools and resources that you can access in order to break out of those vicious cycles. Um, yeah, so take a break at work. A lot of states have individual laws about workplace breaks. I know in Utah it's two 15-minute breaks and a half-hour break for if you work 80 hours. Make sure to take that half-hour break and get yourself some lunch. And if you hear someone talking about like, hey, I worked 80 hours this week, don't tie your self-worth, your self-efficiency, and your self-esteem to how much you produce. That is a capitalistic mindset, and you are so much more than your job and what you do for a living.
So, with all that being said, not only is it important to take care of yourself and understand the environment that you're in, it's really important to also address stigmas that we've kind of talked about in regards to therapy. It can be, some people may find it a good thing. Some people may think that they're going to start being targets, and people are going to start thinking of them differently, or have negative attitudes towards you because you are seeking therapy. And we need to find ways to combat that stigma so that we can encourage more people to seek therapy and take care of themselves, their body, their mind, just their overall health, so that they experience a better life in general. I mean, nobody wants to sit around and just feel tired all the time, and not feel like they want to do anything. And it's hard. It's hard to feel that way, and I'm pretty sure people who do feel that way don't want to feel that way either. With all that being said, it's important to address that about 1 in 5 people will experience significant mental health problems each year. If all of these people are experiencing some kind of mental health problem and they're not seeking the help that they need for that, and it seems as if how are we going to get better? How can we help ourselves get better if we just hide that and break it down, and don't tell anyone about the problems that we're experiencing? I feel like that's going to just make it so much harder on our own mental health, and it's going to restrict us from helping ourselves get better. And so luckily there's a growing recognition of the need for employers to respond effectively to mental health, whether that be provide resources, send out emails with the resources or coping skills, ways that you can deal with this stress and any other mental health issues that you may be experiencing within the workplace, outside of the workplace. Uh, in regards to the high levels of the stigma surrounding mental illness, many of them suffer in silence. They still go to work and they just are miserable. They come home and they're miserable. It's just hard to be in. And so I think a great way that we could help this within the workplace is providing those resources, and whether that be, you know, um, getting someone to come into the office, a therapist to come into the office once a month, once a week, sometimes to provide their employees with access to this healthcare will be very beneficial, because then they know that they'll have access right there. They don't have to worry about whether or not they can afford it. They don't have to worry about whether or not their insurance will cover it. And so it's really important for you know work to entice that. And I read an article, luckily, that in many workplaces this is missing. There's training within the workplace that teach other people about reducing stigma and improving your self-efficiency, as well as promotions of intentions surrounding mental health at work. So luckily, a lot of employees are taking this seriously. They are providing everyone within the company about information to reduce the stigma of receiving help for your mental health and the stress that you may experience.
We were able to come up with some resources. So one of the resources is free, and it is online mindfulness-based stress reduction. And we will put this resource in the video below, and so you'll be able to grant access to this and their website, and it's 100% free. And what it is a mindfulness-based program that is supposed to assist in stress reduction. And you can carry these tools with you into work, into your regular life, and it is shown to be an effective way to manage stress. Um, and not everybody, like, stress management isn't really taught in school. Not a lot of people know how to mitigate this for themselves. So this could be a powerful resource if you are experiencing burnout and you have low SEO, and maybe you don't have the opportunity to invest in yoga classes or other mindfulness classes like the sensory deprivation experience that I was talking about before. Although, if you do want to replicate it, I highly suggest get the little weighted iPads for your eyes and just relax for a little while.
Love it.
Yeah. So that's a good resource. And then I think that you found another one, Sydney.
Yeah, so the one that I saw was in regards to just kind of an overview of the mindfulness based interventions, finding ways to help with coming in touch with your emotions and negative thoughts and bodily sensations, and being able to separate yourself from those feelings. So a lot of the times this is kind of done through like meditation, where you take the time and you try to examine yourself, and any thoughts or emotions that you are feeling, you try to take those away so that you can really fully just embrace yourself and have that moment of peace, to where you're not worrying about any of this, and you're not becoming overwhelmed by all the experiences that you have within your life. And so, a lot of times you can do this meditation at home. You can look up on YouTube and just, try and find some meditation to follow along. So luckily that can be something easy to follow along with. A lot of the times you can do this on your own, but there are opportunities to actually go and be with a therapist who can walk you through these different approaches in this therapy. And what they can do is help walk you step by step until you are able to, get this completed, and you learn how to do it easily, that you can now do it at home. You can take these techniques that you learn within therapy and take them home and use them the best to your ability when you need them the most in a very stressful situation.
Awesome, wonderful. And mindfulness-based techniques, they have roots in Eastern philosophy, but everybody has the ability to access a meditative state of consciousness. It's actually a measurable brainwave frequency called theta. So every human being has that ability to access the theta brainwave frequency. And as you begin to tap into the theta brainwave frequency through techniques such as mindfulness, which is based in Eastern culture, but there's also other ways to access theta, which is proven to reduce stress. So ways that I can think besides mindfulness meditation would be something like dance, or singing, or flow arts, anything that's getting you into a state of flow, where you are putting your conscious busy chatter, the monkey mind, the conscious mind, you're silencing that, and you're focusing and directing your focus like a laser beam onto something that you enjoy. Just that within itself is an act of being mindful. Mindfulness. So mindfulness doesn't necessarily have to mean sitting down breathing and putting all your thoughts away. I know for some people, especially people who have ADHD or other anxiety-based disorders, the idea of sitting down and stilling your mind for an extended period of time is scary. Well, it doesn't have to always be like that. That does work for some. Others, playing World of Warcraft is a state of mindfulness and meditation for them. So there's different ways to cope, but make sure the coping skills that you participate in are coping skills that are going to assist and aid in bringing relief into your life and not bringing on more stress. So perhaps meditating is a little bit more productive than World of Warcraft because you're able to negate some of the stress instead of distracting yourself from it for a little while. Or perhaps that distraction is exactly what you need. So just be mindful of that. And mindfulness is also something that you can carry into your everyday life. You can be mindful of the foods you eat, the way that they taste. There's a mindfulness meditation that I know where you just sit down with a plate of food and you take a bite of whatever it is. Let's say I'm taking a bite of an apple. I chew the apple, I focus on the way the apple tastes, and then I swallow and I sit with the feeling in my body that I get from eating the apple. Is it making my stomach nauseous? Is it giving me energy? I sit and I process that for a minute. And as you do that, that builds neural pathways so you know what foods are going to provide you with the most energy. So bringing that mindfulness into your life can work on every facet, just being aware of what's coming into your space.
For sure. I think that was some good examples. Hope some people can take something away from that. That would be, a great free resource of finding some ways to meditate so that we can go ahead and help with our stress. And so the main point of this podcast is not only to address your attention towards stressful work environments and what can happen within the workplace, but also find ways to help deal with that stress and do things to help yourself. And one of the most important things that we can do is reduce that stigma that comes along with therapy and receiving help for yourself. We can talk with our friends and family and be open and honest about therapy. Be proud that you're in therapy because you are getting help for yourself so that you can be yourself. And so I think it's really important that we address this and talk about this. So don't be shy. Don't be scared to tell people how great therapy is. Don't be scared to try therapy for yourself. Try to find these ways to just help yourself deal with everyday life, everyday problem. It doesn't even have to be anything that deals with mental health. That's a big thing is you can see a therapist for any kind of problem if it is affecting you in any kind of way. And so we want to thank you for sticking with us, listening to this podcast. And I hope that we were able to provide you some good information as well as some coping skills. And I hope that you share this along with your friends, family, and shout it from the rooftops. Therapy is great.
Yes, therapy works. And don't compare yourself to other people within your work environments too, because perhaps they just learned the tools from a therapist and you just don't have those same tools. And so when you decide to put the mask on for yourself to fill your own cup and to take an active stance in your life to reduce the stress, you will be rewarded in all different kinds of ways because this stress affects all different aspects of your life. So just because someone else may have the ability to be able to handle 80-hour work weeks, maybe there's underlying health concerns that you're not seeing. Or maybe they just have more tools in their tool set than you do. And it's up to you to continue to fill your toolbox as to be the best version of yourself. So I hope that you learned something incredibly wonderful today. And yeah, please share this with your friends and family as this is a national health crisis and people deserve to have the resources and the ability to be able to negate this stress.